So what we do, Chris, is we look at today's working age households, and we use data from the Federal Reserve on their finances and income. We make some projections and some assumptions, and what we're measuring is the extent to which they'll have enough money available at retirement to maintain their pre-retirement standard of living. We assume a retirement age of 65 for purposes of the calculation, and there are other things that go into this, but that's basically it. And we find that roughly half of current working age households are at risk of being unable to maintain their standard of living. I mean, there is quite a range, and the demographics do vary. Not surprisingly, younger people are more at risk, partly because they live longer and there are more changes going on in the retirement system for them to adapt to. You also see that higher income people, not surprisingly, are less likely to be at risk, although there's still a considerable number of them, because when we look at this, we're not looking at an absolute standard of income. We're looking at whether they can maintain their own standard of living when they retire. So they have a higher standard of living, which gives them a higher bar than a lower income worker would have. That said, they still have, they tend to be better prepared for retirement. Yeah, actually, that's interesting. We have looked into that, and we found that there are chunks of people in both directions, a not insignificant number who think that they aren't at risk, but they are, and some who think that they are at risk, but they're not. So we see sort of errors on both sides. Some people are overly optimistic, and some are overly pessimistic. Well, certainly one would be coming to a bipartisan agreement on how to strengthen Social Security's long-term finances. That would be the base of any kind of program. We think there are different steps that could be taken to strengthen the 401k system. There's some current bills on the table which would help along that line. We also think that it is important to make sure that more Americans have access to a retirement savings plan in the workplace. Right now, there are a large number of people who don't have access to a 401k plan. And we find that people without access to an easy way to save through payroll deduction are much less likely to save. And so that's a big concern. We also think that more emphasis could be placed on educating people about the benefits of working longer and potentially using their home equity, looking at that as a source of potential income in retirement. So there are a few different options, and what we're really proposing is not necessarily that people do it, but that they give serious thought to it. Because right now, very few people consider it as a potential resource. They just wall it off, and it's not in their consciousness when they're thinking about retirement planning. In our view, they may not have the luxury of doing that in the future, even if they would like to. They may find it necessary. So, one way to do that is to downsize and move to a less expensive house. That unlocks some home equity that you can use. Another option is to take a reverse mortgage from a financial institution, which is essentially taking out drawing out money on your house and then paying it back when you pass away or change living arrangements and sell the house. There's an even simpler way that we have been looking into lately, which would allow people at the state and local level to defer their local property taxes as a way to unlock some of that home equity. And then they would have to pay back again, like a reverse mortgage. They would have to pay the money back when they pass away or sell the house. But that would be perhaps even easier, is to convince people that they can defer their property taxes in a given year. So there are a few ways that could happen. One way is to expand the earned income tax credit to people who are 65 and over and allow them the opportunity to, if they're a lower income worker, to use to get a more of an incentive to work. It's a pro-work incentive. It was always designed that way and has been supported by both parties for many, many years. So that's one option. Other options are what I call softer options, but they're sort of educational campaigns to convince Americans that they should consider perhaps delaying their Social Security, not claim it right away, but delay to a later age. There are a lot of benefits to doing that. The monthly benefit itself goes up significantly when people delay, and that puts people in a much better position. And just otherwise educating people about retirement planning issues through the workplace or through state governments could be a lot of different options for that.